Okay, so chapter 7 is all about physical disorders and health psychology, which is really a very popular area of psychology in present day because we're starting to realize that so many of the health disorders people experience are based on psychological issues. So when we start to think about health psychology, we have to think about the psychological and social factors that impact our health. So we call that the biopsychosocial approach, where we look at biological, psychological, and social factors, and even some behavioral factors. These play a major role in medical illnesses and disease. Some examples of things that could have psychological behavior and social contributors, as well as biological factors, could be general herpes, AIDS, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases. And we recognize that psychological factors and medical conditions can be mutually influential. They can relate to each other. Clinicians try their very hardest to make sure that they're aware of whatever medical conditions are affecting a client whenever they're diagnosing psychiatric disorders, so that they'll know whether the person actually suffers from something or if it's because of some other type of medical issue. Behavioral medicine is the field of health psychology that looks at some of these psychological issues. It is the application of behavioral science to preventing, diagnosing, and treating medical problems. Health psychology is a field where one part of it is about behavioral medicine and studies psychological factors that promote and maintain good health. So, there are two primary ways that psychological and social factors can influence medical illnesses um, from a biological perspective, and then also through longstanding behavioral patterns that may put people at risk for disease. AIDS is an example of both forms of influence, those biological influences as well as behavioral influences. And these issues can be the leading cause of death in the United States. 50% of them are linked to lifestyle and behavioral patterns. Stress also plays a big role in how we view psychological disorders. When a person experiences stress, they have a physiological response. They also can invoke a stress response based on the stressors that are happening in their life. And how a person perceives stress is going to vary from person to person. Two people can go through the same event, and one person can end up really stressed and upset about it, and the other person might be okay. So, the general adaptation syndrome is how we describe how the body handles stress. There are three parts to it. First, there's the alarm stage, which is when the sympathetic nervous system is activated and a person starts to, they've experienced the stressor and then they are kind of giving a response. And it might be, oh no, right? And then phase two is the resistance phase. And that's when a person starts to mobilize. Their body wants to fight whatever stressor is coming about. So there's going to be some type of desire to not have the stressor continue. Till eventually, in phase three, the body becomes exhausted and can no longer handle it. And now your organs, your different parts of your body have been negatively impacted by the stress. When it comes to the biology of stress, from a physiological standpoint, that's when your sympathetic nervous system activates and you produce a lot more cortisol, which is the stress hormone. It can activate various parts of your body to mobilize and take action. The hippocampus plays a role in the HPA stress response cycle. And remember, the hippocampus is responsible for our memories and it's part of the limbic system. It's highly responsible to cortisol and it helps to turn off that HPA cycle. But when a person experiences chronic stress, that can damage their hippocampus. And that damage to the hippocampus can interfere with how the HPA loop responds and not shut off, which would be detrimental to your body's ability to handle stress. So there are also some social influences to stress. we have to think about socioeconomic status, because we know that high levels of cortisol is usually associated with low socioeconomic status because you're stressed more when you have fewer resources. Low social status can also cause your body to not be able to fight off and some of the stress it might be experiencing. We do also know that dominant males can benefit from predictability and controllability in their lives. If they don't have those things, then they could develop stress. There are vulnerabilities in mental illness, the mental illness contributions to physical illness. Because when people feel like they don't have control, they don't have a lot of social support, and their affect, their emotional expression is negative, then that's going to make them vulnerable to mental illness. How your body interprets or how you interpret those physiological responses and situations you go through is critical in how your body will be able to handle the stress. When people have high self-efficacy, they believe in their ability to influence their environment and to make changes. When they have low self-efficacy, they don't believe in their ability to make things different. And if you feel stuck and like you can't make a change in your life, you're going to make yourself much more susceptible to stress and illness and disease. So there are some different parts of the immune system. The humoral branch is responsible for your blood and your other bodily fluids, while the cellular branch is going to protect against viral and parasitic infections. The function of the immune system is to help identify and eliminate different antigens from the body, and leukocytes are the primary agents that are responsible for helping your immune system function. So if you look here at figure 7.3, it kind of gives us an idea of how stress can attack the immune system and cause things to break down. Here's another chart, 7.4, that's also in your textbook. And it shows us that, as you start to experience the stress and things in various areas of your life go bad, then you make yourself susceptible to disease. So leukocytes are, different types of cells within your body that help your body function. B cells produce antibodies, but T cells do not. And after neutralizing a threat, a memory cell is created so that the body can know in the future how it is supposed to respond to those types of situations, because we want to, due to learning, not have the same thing happen to us in the future. So your body's going to have these memory cells so that your body will know how to fight off any type of illness. That's how immunity happens with diseases and things like that. When people experience stress, it can dramatically and quickly alter their immune functioning. It can cause autoimmune diseases and like rheumatoid arthritis. It can make your immune system overactive, and it can make it attack your own body so that it's not able to fight off threats that come about. You could also have P&I, which is how we study the psychological functions that contribute to the neurobiological influence on the immune system. That field of psychoneuroimmunology is something that is very important for us to understand how biologically things impact our immune system. So AIDS is a immunodeficient virus that affects about 34 million people. There were, in 2012, there were 34 million cases. That number very well could be very much higher now. And the course of the disorder is it usually starts with HIV, and then goes into full-blown AIDS. How it ranges and how it progresses is going to depend on the person. We know that stress, the stress of having an AIDS diagnosis can be devastating. And because of that devastation, it can lead to other issues like other health problems. because, for a while, many people looked at it as a death sentence. But now we know that there's a lot of medical therapies that can be used to help people live very long lives. So, when a person experiences high levels of stress and they have very low social support, their progression of their disease that they're experiencing is going to increase. And as someone has AIDS, they have to engage in some type of stress reduction program so that they won't have their immune system misfunctioning. So many times people who've been diagnosed with AIDS will try to not put themselves in situations where they could be prone to stress. That might mean taking some people out of their lives so that their body can function. Cancer is another medical condition that has some psychological and social influences. So there's a whole field of psycho-oncology, which studies the psychological factors and how they relate to cancer. When people feel like they don't have very much control over their life and they don't have many coping strategies, that could make them more susceptible to cancer. When overwhelming and stressful life events happen, and they can have a lot of difficulty. And then when it comes to treating cancer, psychological factors could also play a role in getting treatment and going through chemotherapy. So we know that cancer can be influenced by psychological, behavior, and social factors. And there's a lot of support groups and education groups, particularly for women who have breast cancer. Sometimes women can experience low self-esteem, low body image, low control, low optimism, a lack of support at home. And, depending on the progression of their disorder and what they decide to do, if they decide to, my apologies for that. And so many women were likely to benefit from an education intervention when it came to their experiences with breast cancer. When it comes to cardiovascular problems like hypertension, this is when the heart and blood vessels don't pump the way they should. A person experiences high blood pressure, and that can be a risk factor for stroke, heart disease, and kidney disease, some of the leading causes of death in the United States. It can cause wear and tear of the blood vessels, and that, of course, is not very good. Hypertension affects about 27.6% of adults between the ages of 35 and 64. 29% of people over the age of 18 are affected by hypertension. African Americans find themselves at most risk. It's often affected by salt, fluid volume, sympathetic arousal, and stress. We know that some other psychological factors can also influence the development of hypertension, such as anger and hostility. So again, cardiovascular problems have psychological, behavior, and social factors that influence them. Coronary heart disease is another cardiovascular disease that could be related to stress. When a person's arteries are blocked and they can't get blood going to their heart muscles, it could result in a heart attack, which of course is not good. So there are some psychological and behavioral risk factors for coronary heart disease as well. Stress, anxiety, anger, poor coping skills, low social support, lifestyle changes, having a type A behavioral personality pattern, being prone to anger and impatient. These things are all not good. And if you notice from all of the disorders we talked about, a lot of these psychological and behavioral risk factors are the same. Chronic pain can also have some impacts on people psychologically. There can be acute chronic pain, and there can be acute pain and also chronic pain. So acute pain is going to be pain that follows an injury, but it's going to naturally go away. Like if you stub your toe, you're going to have pain for a while. You're probably going to rub it. It's going to go away. But chronic pain might begin as acute pain, but it doesn't go away by itself. So that's when you stub your toe, but in a few days, you're like, I think I have to go to the doctor. My toe might be broken. So the severity of pain doesn't predict a person's reaction to it because people have different pain tolerances. There are some psychological and social aspects of pain as well. Whether or not a person has control over their pain and their consequences will matter. Having negative emotions and poor coping skills and not having good social support, being reinforced for pain behaviors. And there's a theory in psychology called the gate control theory of pain, which says that your spinal cord has a neurological gate that when closed, you don't experience pain, but when open, you experience pain. So those impulses from painful experiences will travel up the spine and open that gate. But when we rub or try to take the pain away, we take some pain reducing medication that closes that neurological gate. Chronic fatigue is another health condition that can have psychological, behavioral, and social influences. And this happens when people are just always tired. They don't have energy. They experience pain. They might even have a low-grade fever. It tends to be most common in females, primarily in Western. It is also increasing in Western countries. It's unrelated to a viral infection and immune problems and depression, but it's this feeling of intense fatigue that tends to plague people. So there's a number of potential causes, like being very high achievement oriented and leading a very fast paced life, and interpreting illness in a way that's not really helpful. When it comes to thinking about chronic fatigue, we know that people who have core beliefs that are kind of negative can be subjectable to chronic fatigue and always wanting to sleep. Believing that you always have to do things perfectly and you can't show weakness, or not asking for help and always putting on a brave face. Those are all things that could have an impact and lead to chronic fatigue syndrome. Other triggers could be things like stress and acute illness, and that could lead to fatigue, muscle pain, other symptoms, not being able to function on a daily basis, having illogical thoughts. I should try harder to cope. I can beat this. There's nothing more I can do. And that, of course, can impact a person's mood. Behaviors such as extreme rest and avoidance of activities, seeking medical care, putting on a brave face, can also either help or hurt someone who's experiencing chronic fatigue syndrome. And mostly it's treated by cognitive behavioral therapy, because we need to change the person's thinking in order to perhaps also change the way they behave. It's been found that medications aren't very helpful for chronic fatigue syndrome. So when it comes to physical disorders, there are a few things that we can do to try to treat them. Biofeedback is one area of treatment that has been found to be very effective. This is when a patient learns to control their bodily responses. It's often used with chronic headaches and hypertension, when a person learns to relax and meditate. Other treatment methods are things like comprehensive stress reduction and pain management programs. These are more effective and durable than individual interventions alone. Denial could be a means of coping. And for some people, it's just like they refuse to believe that something is happening. That can suppress their negative thoughts because they aren't thinking about the seriousness of the disorder. But of course, it could come back later if they aren't motivated to change. Different lifestyle practices can also be of promise when it comes to promoting good health, engaging in behaviors that are positive, and seeking out prevention and intervention programs that target behavioral programs can be helpful. So there are a few lifestyle behaviors that people can engage in, such as injury and injury prevention, understanding and being able to know the importance of keeping yourself healthy, going through an AIDS prevention program, exercising, going on a diet, promoting good health and wellness. So, a real good example for you to understand this is smoking in China. At one point, there were 320 million smokers in China. 90% of them were male. The reasons they said they smoked is because it was a symbol of freedom and it was socially beneficial. And there was a mistaken belief that the health consequences could be managed, and tobacco is important to the economy. It's a big money maker. So eventually, what happened is there was an intervention program conducted where the children of fathers who smoke were given psychoeducation and they were taught ways to help their fathers stop smoking. And that was able to help decrease the number of smokers in China because they took advantage of the importance of family ties and understanding the risk factors. So, in summary, psychological factors can play a major role in physical disorders. Behavioral medicine and health psychology are two fields of study that help us understand that. Psychological and social factors have to do with the role illness and disease can play in a person's development of a health disorder and their ability to withstand stress. There are some risk factors for physical illness, depending on lifestyle factors and different behaviors people engage in. There's also some psychosocial treatments, primarily targeted at community programs, education, and helping people understand what they can do differently. I hope this information has been helpful to you guys for understanding Chapter 7, Physical Disorders and Health Psychology.